Hi everyone, it's Chris at the Vinyl Orchard, back with a video just to share some recent vinyl finds. So stuff I've picked up in the last couple of weeks or so, although some things do go back to probably December time actually. So first one is this album. This is a late 70s repress of Spirit's first album. So Spirit were like America's equivalent of Traffic, I guess. Accomplished musicians, stylish, good songwriting, psychedelic, bit rocky, occasionally soulful. For some reason, they never found themselves in the public consciousness, which is surprising, actually, given the quality of their music and their songwriting. Maybe it's because they never had like a really big hit single, possibly, I don't know. So this album, as I said, it's a repress of their first one, transitions from rock to pop to psychedelic, even a little bit jazzy in places. And it's the album that features the song Taurus, a Randy California song, which was at the centre of the Led Zeppelin row, because the acoustic moment in this song is very similar to Stairway to Heaven. Now, Led Zeppelin did actually open for Spirit back in the day, so maybe Page was influenced by them, I don't know. But if you listen to Sonata di Chitarra by Giovanni Granata from 16-something, you'll see where they got their influence from. So Jay Ferguson, great vocalist, Randy California, really good guitarist. This is good kind of earthy music, tad psychedelic, as I said, in places. It gently kind of flows along with quite sophisticated, jazzy, compositional kind of approach. It's quite a diverse track list, actually. The last song, Elijah, is like a full-on jazz fusion and time signature wig out. So a really nice mix of stuff on the opening album, or the debut album from Spirit. Next up is the this is a 1979 reissue of Tubeway Army's debut album. So this is Gary Newman's pre-solo project. Not quite the synthesizer sort of sound of Replicas, which came later, but certainly a really good album nonetheless. It's quite punky in places, actually, with a lot of kind of jaggedy guitar riffs. Now, it originally came out in 1978. I think it was on blue vinyl, possibly in a blue cover, and was then re-released following the success of Replicas. Some great songs on it, actually. My Shadow in Vain is a great song, as is Friends, and it features that, you know, that kind of robotic vocal that Gary Newman had. There's some Bowie-esque riffing, some interesting lyrics. I think the production, I don't know who did produce it, but the production is a little bit primitive, but certainly a really fascinating album worthy of seeking out, actually. Probably no standout songs, and probably because it doesn't feature any hit singles. And I think when it first came out, it sank without a trace, actually. But obviously, following the success of Replicas, it was reissued, and I think possibly might have made top 10. It doesn't have the kind of the intensity or the polish of Replicas, or the robotic kind of pop nous of the Pleasure Principle, but it does introduce the world to Gary Newman's unique vocal lyrical style. Complete with some quite clever arrangements and a good solid set of songs, actually. So good stuff. Nice pickup. Next album is a Harvest Heritage twofer. This is The Pretty Things. Now, I've never seen this before, actually, so I was really pleased to pick this up. It's a really good price. It has two albums on it, SF Sorrow and Parachute. Now, I'm much more familiar with SF Sorrow than I am with Parachute, and I'm not sure if they're both actually concept albums, possibly. SF Sorrow is from 1968. It's got some great songs on it, actually. The vocalist, is it Phil Mays, I think it is? Great vocalist. And he seems to go fairly effortlessly from being a rocker to a balladeer. Does that without skipping a beat. And in places, it's quite psychedelic. There's some great songwriting, some great harmonies, and some really, really solid songs. There's the track list there. Only a couple of duds, I think, really, on the SF Sorrow. Other than that, really good range of styles. An album possibly that went fairly unnoticed at the time, actually, and I think quite a lot of people made comparisons with the Beatles, which I think is a bit disingenuous, actually, because this is a really good album in its own right. And if it is, I think it is a concept album, actually, SF Sorrow, and I think for me it's an equal of things like, I don't know, the Village Green Preservation Society or Tommy, and it's got a little bit of Forever Changes and Odyssey and Oracle in there as well. So a really good blend of acoustic, electric stuff, multi-layered vocals. Really underrated album, I think. The other album, Parachute, the other that forms part of this twofer, is an album I wasn't really aware of, actually. It's from 1970. It's very listenable, got some really good songs, some bluesy sort of bass tunes, a bit poppy in places, bit proggy in places, certainly quite Beatlesque, and I think it was recorded actually at Abbey Road. I'm not saying that makes your album sound more Beatle-like, but it certainly has that feel. And again, I think it probably went under the radar because it was competing in 1970 with, you know, Bridge Over Troubled Water, Layla, Let It Be, all of those kind of albums, The Doors. So it's not as good, I don't think, as SF Sorrow, but certainly an enjoyable listen. So good, nice little pickup. Next is this one. This is Love Revisited. This is from the same year, actually, 1970. It's kind of like a greatest hits, really, but they take some of the supposedly better material from the first 4 Elektra albums. So it's got the hit singles to the kind of main songs, certainly the ones that I remember from some of their earlier albums, although it doesn't represent all the good material from those first 4 records, but it's a nice mix of songs, actually. The later stuff on here is actually quite guitar orientated with Albert Lee to the fore, and it contrasts quite nicely, I think, with the more kind of folky vocal aspects of some of their output. So all in all, a bit of a battered cover, but all in all, a really nice summation of their first 4 albums. I've got a little quibble with the content. So nice and cheap, just for £4, so good stuff. Next up, a couple of jazz albums. So the first one is this is Lee Morgan's Sidewinder from 1964. So Lee Morgan was a member of Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, tremendous trumpet player. And this is, I think, a tremendous album. I think it's seen as a classic, isn't it? It also features Joe Henderson on tenor sax, and he's responsible, I think, for quite a big slice, actually, of the kind of magic of this album. And the blend of him and Lee Morgan on this just adds so much to the quality, but it's incredibly well anchored as well by the rhythm section of Billy Higgins and Bob Cranshaw. It's just got a wonderful atmosphere to this album. It's like being in a jazz club, really. Nice. It's not blisteringly fast, but it's not slow either, and it has a kind of a tremendous drive to it, and I think that's partly down just to the brilliant drumming of Billy Higgins in this. So all in all, tremendous album, which I'm sure lots of you are really, really familiar with. The other jazz album is also a reissue. I think it's a 2021 reissue. So this is Song for My Father by the Horace Silver Quartet. I was initially a little bit disappointed. This is a brand new album, a 64, 65 album, but a repress. This is a 2021 repress of it. And a couple of times I think it's a little bit distorted, actually, in places. So a real masterpiece of an album, sports slightly possibly by the pressing. So Song for My Father, the opening song, is obviously the famous song and is just amazing. But you know, The Natives Are Restless Tonight is as wonderful as the title track, and the whole album is just full of catchy, groovy, hard bops tracks. Got some low-key kind of chill-out songs as well. Again, really great stuff. An album I'm sure you're familiar with. Next up is this. This is No Pussyfooting by Robert Fripp and Brian Eno from 1973, although this is an early 80s repress of it on EG Editions record. This was cheap. It was just £3. And a good job it was cheap as well, because it's absolutely crap. I'm not sure if Fripp and Eno are taking themselves too seriously here, or they're actually just taking the piss. I do honestly think that the only reason you would possibly like this album is because you think you should. You know, it claims to be avant-garde, it claims to be ambient, but I find it really jarring, actually. It just drones on with kind of endless tape loops. You know, some people saw this album as groundbreaking. I've absolutely no idea why, actually. I've no idea what anyone would like this album, so it's destined to stay in the garage or to be sold on, probably the latter. Next up is this album. This is Live Wire Blues Power from Albert King. So this is a late 70s repress, a French repress of a 1968 album. This is a great album with some absolutely wonderful moments on it. There's some slow blues on here with kind of banter with the crowd and a kind of talking blues delivery and some really, really intense guitar work. It features also a really nice bluesy cover, actually, of, opens the album, actually, of Watermelon Man, which is Herbie Hancock track. It's recorded live at the Fillmore, I think in 1968. The performances are really creative and really, really powerful. Some really fine electric blues, got a great band together, and obviously at the fore of that is this wonderful guitarist, Albert King. He just seems so comfortable with the blues, you know, really controlled delivery, relaxed vocals, some gorgeous guitar solos on here, which are always melodic, never outstay their welcome. He's also a great vocalist as well, and of the three kings, Albert, BB and Freddie, he's kind of got the, if you like, the smokiest voice of all of them. It doesn't quite have the precision and the range that the other two have, but it's certainly a lovely voice, and his guitar playing is wonderful. Blues at Sunrise, which is over 8 minutes long, nearly 9 minutes long, is possibly one of his most famous tracks, and it's beautifully delivered on here. Hugely influential guitarist, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Gary Moore, big fans of this man. His playing is just full of kind of string bends and sustain and just superb technique. So he's one of the best. This is on the Stax label, and I think he's one of the better performers on that label, and that includes a great wealth of musicians, doesn't it? Like Isaac Hayes and Staple Singers and Booker T and so on. But an album full of creativity, full of power, just gorgeous stuff. Really like that. Next up is an album I just picked up the other day, actually. So I've only played it through once. There's a Riot Going On. This is Sly and the Family Stone from 1971. It's on the Epic label. It's got a little lyric inner as well. Is this possibly one of the best funk albums ever? It's absolutely marvellous. Outside of kind of James Brown, I think Sly Stone was just the funkiest ever. Brilliant. Side 2 closes with Africa Talks to You, and I think side 1 or side 2 is Thank You for Talking to Me, Africa, and they're slow, druggy epics. They're just brilliant and so funky. Family Affair, that's probably the most famous song here. It's danceable, it's funky, but there's a real dark tone to this album, and they've lost the kind of sunny optimism of the album that came before it, which was called Stand. So this is, or the band are a kind of really nice infectious mix actually of rock, soul, pop, and of course funk, fueled by that civil rights movement and the kind of the hippie kind of movement. But this album from the early 70s has a general feel much more of chaos and dissonance, and is probably much more funky than previous albums. Now, musicianship is absolutely top notch on here. The bass player, is it Larry someone? His bass playing is to the fore. It just provides this album with such a wonderful groove. I love it. It's a really great album and different to what I might normally listen to. Last of the albums is this one really, the Pogues. This is their debut album. If you don't tap your feet and smile during this album, I don't think you have a soul. This is their debut album from '84 on Stiff Records, Red Roses for Me. If you need cheering up, pour yourself a whiskey and just listen to this album, and especially the track Streams of Whiskey. I mean, I think the Pogues are a fantastic band, and their first 3 albums, for me anyway, are just all-time classics. This isn't as good as their second album, which was Rum, Sodomy and the Lash, or their third album, which is If I Fall from the Grace of God, but nonetheless I think this is a great debut. They were quite an unusual band actually. Shane MacGowan, their main man, was kind of steeped in Irish history and culture as well as drinking, and this has got a kind of a punk energy to it, and obviously there's a real punk influence, but there's also quite a nice mix as well of kind of traditional Irish music. So it's great foot stomping, Guinness swilling, whiskey drinking fun with a fair measure of intelligence and humour and political consciousness as well. So a really great debut album, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And the last, I've just got 4 45s that I've picked up. So a couple of charity shop finds. The first one is on Trojan Records, and this is You Can Get It If You Really Want, Jimmy Cliff song, but done here by Desmond Decker. But really, this is odd charity shop pickup of the year so far. David Gilmour, Arnold Lane, featuring David Bowie. So this is from 2006. I've never seen that before. It's all right, but I said charity shop pickup. And then 2 others. The double single, I had this before, but not in a picture sleeve and not as a double. So Heads Down, No Nonsense, Mindless Boogie by Alberto Elos Trios Paranoias. And the final one is the second single from The Slits from 1980, and this is Man Next Door on Beggars Banquet Records. So there you go. There's the stuff that I found over the last month or so. Tell me what you think in the comments below, and any other recommendations based on that kind of thing. Really gratefully received. Catch up soon. Cheers everyone. Bye.